The notification sound echoed through my quiet Arlington apartment at exactly 6:47 a.m. Not unusual timing for government work, but this wasn't coming through secure channels. It was a regular email sitting in my personal inbox like a piece of junk mail, except the sender made my stomach drop. Jake Morrison, Director of Operations. No pleasantries, no meeting request, just a subject line that would change everything. Workforce optimization, immediate action required. I remember staring at those words while my coffee maker gurgled in the background, steam fogging up my kitchen window that overlooked the Potomac. 16 years of flawless service, perfect security evaluations, and 0 incidents under my watch, and it was ending with corporate speak in an email that probably took him 30 seconds to write. The attachment was worse than the message itself. A separation agreement with my name already filled in, effective date listed as today, and a checkbox marked next to position elimination, strategic restructuring. They hadn't even bothered to schedule a meeting. After 16 years of protecting their most classified contracts, I was being dismissed like a subscription service they no longer needed. What Jake Morrison didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I wasn't just another employee they could replace with a cheaper alternative. I was Sarah Mitchell, and I held something that couldn't be transferred, outsourced, or downloaded from the internet. I possessed the only active top-secret sensitive compartmented information clearance with Pentagon direct facility access in the entire company. In the defense contracting world, that combination was rarer than winning lottery tickets and infinitely more valuable. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning I received that email marked the beginning of what would become the most expensive mistake in Apex Defense Solutions' corporate history. But to understand how a single termination nearly destroyed a $180 million company, you need to understand who I really was and what I actually did behind those boring job titles that looked so easy to eliminate on a spreadsheet. My name is Sarah Elizabeth Mitchell, though everyone at Apex simply called me Sarah from security. For 16 years I served as the Senior Security Compliance Officer at Apex Defense Solutions, a mid-sized defense contractor headquartered in a nondescript glass building just outside Arlington, Virginia. The kind of place where you needed 3 different ID badges just to reach my office on the 4th floor, and where conversations about weekend plans could never include specifics about where you worked or what projects kept you busy. To most people, including apparently my former boss, my job sounded like corporate paperwork with a security twist. They imagined me checking that computers had updated antivirus software, making sure employees didn't leave sensitive documents on their desks, maybe reviewing email policies to prevent data breaches. The kind of work that seemed important enough to justify a decent salary, but boring enough that anyone with a business degree could probably handle it. They were catastrophically wrong. What I actually did was far more complex and infinitely more critical. I was the human bridge between Apex Defense Solutions and the most classified levels of the United States military-industrial complex. Every classified email that entered our systems passed through protocols I maintained. Every secure video conference with Pentagon officials required authentication codes I personally managed. Every piece of restricted technical data that formed the backbone of our most lucrative contracts existed within security frameworks I had spent years constructing and maintaining. I held security clearances that most people in the defense industry had heard of but never seen. My top secret clearance came with sensitive compartmented information access, which meant I could work with intelligence-derived information that was compartmentalized beyond normal classified level. The polygraph endorsement on my clearance required annual lifestyle updates and periodic examinations that probed everything from my financial situation to my personal relationships. But the real crown jewel of my credentials was something called Pentagon Building Direct Access Authorization. Out of roughly 2.8 million Americans who hold some form of security clearance, fewer than 1,000 possess the specific combination of clearances, facility access, and continuous vetting required for unrestricted access to Pentagon facilities. I was one of the Apex Defense Solutions. I was the only one. This wasn't just a matter of professional prestige. In the defense contracting world, having Pentagon direct access meant our company could participate in classified briefings, compete for restricted contracts, and maintain ongoing relationships with military program managers who controlled billions in defense spending. Without that access, Apex would be locked out of the most profitable tier of government work, relegated to competing for basic supply contracts and commercial off-the-shelf purchases. My typical day started with checking secure communications that had arrived overnight from various Pentagon offices, each requiring different handling protocols depending on classification levels and compartment. I reviewed draft contract proposals to ensure they met security requirements before submission, coordinated with facility security personnel at Apex to maintain our cleared status, and managed the complex documentation requirements that kept our security clearances active and our contracts legally compliant. The work was meticulous, often tedious, and completely invisible when done correctly. Success in security compliance meant that nothing dramatic ever happened. No headlines, no recognition, no exciting stories to share at dinner parties. Just the quiet satisfaction of knowing that classified information remained protected, that sensitive contracts proceeded smoothly, and that the company's most valuable relationships remained intact. I lived alone in a one-bedroom apartment in Arlington, close enough to the office that I could respond to security emergencies within 20 minutes, but far enough from downtown D.C. to afford rent on a government salary. My personal life was necessarily constrained by the requirements of maintaining high-level clearances. Foreign travel required advance approval and detailed reporting. Financial irregularities could trigger security review. Even my choice of friends and romantic relationships carried potential security implications that I had to consider carefully. This wasn't paranoia or government overreach. When you hold the keys to classified information that could affect national security, your entire life becomes part of the security equation. I accepted these constraints because I understood their purpose and because I genuinely believed in the importance of the work I was doing. Jake Morrison arrived at Apex Defense Solutions on a humid Monday morning in March, carrying an MBA from Wharton Business School and a mandate from the board of directors to modernize operations and improve efficiency metrics. He came from the commercial telecommunications sector, where he had successfully streamlined operations at a mid-sized company by outsourcing non-core functions and implementing automated systems wherever possible. His resume was impressive in a conventional business sense. He had reduced operational costs by 23% at his previous company, eliminated redundant positions, and implemented technology solutions that improved reporting speed and accuracy. The board of directors saw exactly what they wanted: a results-oriented leader who could bring contemporary business practices to a company they felt had become too comfortable with old-fashioned approaches. From the moment Jake walked into our first department meeting, I could see that he viewed Apex through the lens of commercial business optimization. He talked about eliminating silos, streamlining workflows, and implementing best practices from other industries. His PowerPoint presentations were polished and convincing, filled with graphs showing potential cost savings and efficiency improvements. During his second week, Jake scheduled individual meetings with department heads to understand current operations and identify opportunities for improvement. When my turn came, I sat across from him in his newly redecorated office, watching him flip through a folder containing my job description, performance evaluations, and salary information. His questions revealed a fundamental misunderstanding of what security compliance meant in the defense contracting context. He asked why we couldn't simply purchase cybersecurity software to automate most of my responsibility. He wondered whether we really needed a full-time position for what seemed like periodic compliance checks. He suggested that modern security firms could probably handle our requirements more efficiently than a single in-house employee. I attempted to explain the difference between commercial cybersecurity and defense security clearance management. I described how classified contracts required continuous oversight by cleared personnel, how Pentagon relationships depended on personal trust built over years of reliable service, and how security clearances were non-transferable personal credentials that couldn't be outsourced or automated. Jake listened politely, but I could see in his expression that he interpreted my explanations as resistance to change rather than essential information about how defense contracting actually worked. He had arrived with solutions already in mind, and my role appeared to be an obvious target for cost reduction. 3 weeks after our meeting, Jake presented his operational efficiency plan to the board of directors. The presentation was masterful in its clarity and compelling in its financial projections. He identified several positions that could be eliminated or consolidated, processes that could be automated, and functions that could be outsourced to specialized firms. My position appeared on slide 12 under the heading, Security Compliance Optimization. Jake had obtained quotes from 3 different commercial security firms, each promising comprehensive security services at costs significantly lower than my annual salary and benefit. The projected savings were substantial, $180,000 per year in direct compensation costs, plus additional savings from eliminating the overhead associated with maintaining security clearances and facility requirements. The board members asked practical questions about transition timelines and service capabilities, but none of them possessed the specialized knowledge necessary to understand what would actually be lost in the proposed change. They saw security compliance as a necessary but generic function that could be performed more efficiently by outside specialists. Jake's presentation included testimonials from other companies that had successfully outsourced their security function. What he didn't mention, because he didn't understand it himself, was that none of those companies worked on classified government contracts. They were commercial enterprises protecting customer data, intellectual property, and business communication. Their security requirements were fundamentally different from the specialized world of defense contracting. The vote was unanimous. The board approved Jake's efficiency plan with enthusiasm, praising his thorough analysis and innovative approach to modernizing Apex operations. They authorized him to proceed with implementation immediately, confident that they were positioning the company for improved profitability and competitive advantage. Jake scheduled my termination meeting for the following Tuesday morning. He seemed genuinely pleased with himself as he explained how my responsibilities would be transferred to CyberShield Security Solutions, a well-regarded firm that specialized in comprehensive security services for mid-sized companies. He emphasized that this change represented progress, not downsizing, and that Apex would actually receive better security coverage than what I had been providing as a single individual. I listened without arguing or attempting to change his mind. By that point, I understood that Jake had convinced himself he was making a smart business decision, and no amount of explanation about clearance requirements or Pentagon relationships would alter his perception. He had reduced a complex, specialized function to a simple cost-benefit analysis, and the numbers supported his conclusion. Instead of protesting, I spent my remaining days at Apex methodically preparing for a transition. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story, and that would be far more consequential than anyone realized. I began documenting every classified relationship, every security protocol, and every Pentagon contact that would become inaccessible the moment my clearance status changed from active to inactive. The process was more complex than simply creating a handover document. Much of what I did depended on personal relationships and institutional trust that had been built over years of reliable service. Pentagon security officers knew me by name and trusted my judgment on classification issues. Program managers relied on my understanding of their specific requirements when reviewing contract proposals. Facility security personnel throughout the defense contractor community recognized my clearances and accepted my authority on security matters. These relationships couldn't be transferred to a commercial security firm, no matter how competent they might be in their own domain. When my clearances became inactive, I would lose access to the classified systems and secured facilities that formed the foundation of Apex's most valuable contract. That access couldn't be delegated or shared. It was tied specifically to my individual clearances and would disappear entirely when I left the company. I also began removing my personal authentication codes from the various secure systems that Apex used for classified communication. Each system required individual clearance verification and personal responsibility for security breaches. As my employment ended, my legal authority to access these systems would terminate as well, leaving gaps that couldn't be filled until another cleared individual completed the lengthy process of obtaining equivalent access. The most critical step was documenting the master list of every classified project, security deadline, and compliance requirement that kept Apex legally authorized to handle Pentagon contracts. This information existed in various classified databases and secure communication systems that would become inaccessible once my clearances went inactive. I had maintained this comprehensive overview as part of my security officer responsibilities, but it had never been formally documented in a way that could be transferred to someone without appropriate clearances. I wasn't being vindictive or deliberately sabotaging Apex's operation. The restrictions I was operating under were legal requirements that applied to anyone holding high-level security clearances. When clearances become inactive, access to classified information must be terminated immediately and completely. I couldn't leave behind classified documents, couldn't share restricted contact information, and couldn't provide guidance on matters that required active clearances to discuss legally. Jake interpreted my methodical approach to departure as professional diligence and complimented me on ensuring a smooth transition. He remained confident that CyberShield Security Solutions would be able to maintain all necessary functions without interruption. The beautiful irony was that he was pleased with how efficiently I was eliminating myself from the company's operations, not understanding that I was actually documenting the approaching collapse of Apex's classified contract capability. My final day at Apex Defense Solutions was a Friday in early May. I cleaned out my desk, returned my various ID badges and access cards, and logged out of the secure communication systems for the final time. Jake shook my hand and thanked me for my years of service, expressing confidence that the new security arrangements would serve the company well into the future. As I walked out of the building that had been my professional home for 16 years, I carried with me something that Jake Morrison had never thought to ask about: complete knowledge of every classified relationship, security requirement and compliance deadline that kept Apex qualified to receive the contracts that generated 60% of their annual revenue. The transition to CyberShield Security Solutions appeared seamless from the outside. The new team arrived the following Monday with impressive credentials and modern equipment. Their presentation to Apex leadership emphasized automated threat detection, real-time monitoring capabilities, and comprehensive compliance reporting. Jake was thrilled with their professional approach and sophisticated technology. What the dashboards and monitoring systems didn't show was that none of the CyberShield consultants held security clearances of any kind. They were exceptionally qualified to protect Apex's commercial networks and business data, but they had no legal authority to access the classified systems that formed the backbone of the company's most profitable operation. The disconnect wasn't immediately obvious because classified and commercial systems operated independently. Apex's regular business communications, financial data and administrative functions continued normally under CyberShield's protection. The problems would only become apparent when classified contracts required security oversight that the new team couldn't legally provide. Jake celebrated the successful transition in the company's monthly newsletter, praising CyberShield's professional capabilities and highlighting the cost savings achieved through strategic outsourcing. He positioned the change as evidence of Apex's commitment to modernization and operational excellence. 3 weeks later, the first test of the new security arrangements arrived in the form of a routine quarterly security review notice from the Pentagon. In the past, I would have received this notification through secure channels and begun the standard 2-week preparation process. This time, the notice arrived through regular mail at Apex's general business address, where it was processed as routine correspondence and forwarded to Jake's office. The timing was unfortunate. I was gone, my clearances were inactive, and CyberShield Security Solutions was about to discover that Pentagon security reviews had nothing to do with the cybersecurity protocols they had been hired to manage. The Pentagon's quarterly security assessment notice arrived on a Wednesday morning in June, processed through Apex's mailroom like any other piece of government correspondence. Sandra Williams, the administrative assistant who handled Jake's calendar, placed it in his inbox alongside vendor invoices and meeting requests, noting only that it appeared to be some kind of audit notification requiring response within 14 days. Jake forwarded the notice to CyberShield Security Solutions with a brief message, expressing confidence in their ability to handle whatever compliance requirements the Pentagon might have. He assumed this was similar to the various regulatory audits that his previous telecommunications company had navigated successfully through proper documentation and professional presentation. Marcus Thompson, CyberShield's lead consultant, reviewed the notice with the same methodical approach he applied to all compliance requests. The document requested comprehensive documentation of security procedures, personnel clearance verification, facility security measures, and classified material handling protocol. To Marcus, these appeared to be standard security audit requirements that could be addressed through their established compliance framework. CyberShield began preparing their response using the same template they had successfully employed for dozens of commercial clients. They compiled network security documentation, assembled evidence of their monitoring capabilities, prepared presentations on their threat detection systems, and gathered testimonials from satisfied customers who praised their comprehensive approach to information security. The preparation process took 8 days, with Marcus personally reviewing every document to ensure professional presentation and complete coverage of the requested topics. He was particularly proud of their automated compliance reporting system, which generated real-time security metrics and demonstrated continuous monitoring of potential threats. On the designated audit date, Marcus and 2 junior consultants arrived at Apex's offices, dressed in professional business attire and carrying tablet computers loaded with their presentation material. They were greeted by Jake Morrison, who expressed appreciation for their thorough preparation and confidence that the audit would proceed smoothly. The Pentagon security team arrived 30 minutes later in an unmarked government vehicle. Colonel Patricia Hayes stepped out first, followed by 2 civilian security specialists, whose credentials identified them as representatives of the Defense Security Service. They wore business casual clothing but carried themselves with the unmistakable bearing of career military and intelligence professionals. Colonel Hayes requested to speak privately with Apex's facility security officer before beginning the formal audit process. Jake assumed this was a procedural formality and directed her to Marcus Thompson, introducing him as the head of Apex's new security compliance team and emphasizing his extensive experience in comprehensive security management. The conversation that followed lasted exactly 4 minutes and changed everything. Colonel Hayes began with a simple question about Marcus's current security clearance level and the date of his most recent polygraph examination. Marcus responded honestly that CyberShield operated as a commercial security firm and that none of their consultants held government security clearances, as they had never been required for their client work. The silence that followed this response stretched long enough for Jake to realize that something fundamental had gone wrong. Colonel Hayes asked Marcus to step outside the conference room, then turned to Jake with an expression that conveyed both professional disappointment and personal concern. The Pentagon, Colonel Hayes explained, was not conducting a cybersecurity audit of Apex's commercial network. They were performing a mandatory security assessment of a cleared defense contractor's ability to protect classified information and maintain the security standards required for continued access to restricted government contracts. Every cleared contractor was required to designate a facility security officer who possessed appropriate security clearances and maintained continuous oversight of classified material handling procedure. This individual served as the primary point of contact between the contractor and government security offices, ensuring that classified information remained protected according to established protocol. Jake attempted to explain that Apex had recently modernized their security operations by partnering with a specialized firm that provided comprehensive coverage of all security requirements. Colonel Hayes listened patiently, then asked a question that exposed the full scope of the problem. Where, she inquired, were Apex's current personnel security clearance files, classified material accountability records, and facility security inspection documentation? Who maintained their secure communications equipment, managed their relationships with other cleared contractors, and ensured compliance
with the continuous reporting requirements that governed their access to classified contracts. Jake realized with growing alarm that he had no answers to any of these questions. The documentation Colonel Hayes was requesting existed in classified systems that required security clearances to access. The procedures she was asking about involved specialized protocols that were completely separate from the commercial cybersecurity measures that CyberShield had implemented. Marcus Thompson and his team had been protecting Apex's business networks admirably, but they had been operating in complete ignorance of the classified contract management systems that generated the majority of the company's revenue. They had no legal authority to access classified information, no training in government security protocols, and no understanding that defense contractors' security requirements were fundamentally different from commercial data protection. The audit proceeded for another 2 hours, but the outcome was predetermined from the moment Colonel Hayes discovered that Apex no longer employed a qualified facility security officer. Each question revealed additional gaps in classified material handling, personnel security management, and facility security compliance. The Pentagon team documented their findings methodically, noting that Apex appeared to have inadvertently eliminated their capability to maintain the security standards required for continued access to classified contracts. They were careful to emphasize that this appeared to be the result of misunderstanding rather than deliberate negligence, but the security implications remained severe regardless of intent. Jake watched his cost-saving initiative transform into a potential disaster as Colonel Hayes explained the immediate consequences of failing a quarterly security assessment. Apex would receive a formal security deficiency notice, requiring comprehensive remediation within 30 days. During this period, their access to new classified contracts would be suspended, and their ability to continue work on existing classified projects would be subject to enhanced oversight and restriction. If Apex failed to demonstrate adequate security compliance within the 30-day remediation period, their facility security clearance would be suspended indefinitely. This would terminate their access to all classified contracts, secure communication systems, and restricted government facilities. The financial impact would be immediate and catastrophic, as classified contracts represented approximately 60% of Apex's annual revenue. Colonel Hayes concluded the audit by requesting that Apex identify their plans for restoring appropriate security oversight and designating a qualified facility security officer. She emphasized that this position required an individual with active security clearances, comprehensive understanding of defense contractor security requirements, and the authority to ensure continuous compliance with government security standards. After the Pentagon team departed, Jake sat in the conference room with Marcus Thompson and the CyberShield consultants, contemplating the magnitude of the miscalculation he had made. Marcus was apologetic but honest about his team's limitations. They had never represented themselves as qualified to handle classified contract security, and they lacked the clearances necessary to address the deficiencies that the audit had identified. Jake spent the remainder of that day attempting to understand how security clearances worked, and whether there might be expedited processes for obtaining the credentials that Apex apparently needed. His research revealed that top-secret security clearances typically required 12 to 18 months for initial processing, with additional time needed for specialized access and facility approval. Even if he could identify qualified candidates immediately, the timeline for obtaining appropriate clearances would extend far beyond the 30-day remediation period that Colonel Hayes had specified. Apex needed someone with existing clearances who could assume the facility security officer role and begin addressing the documented deficiencies within a matter of days, not months. The realization that dawned on Jake Morrison that evening was both obvious and humbling. There was exactly one person who possessed the clearances, experience, and detailed knowledge of Apex's classified contracts necessary to resolve the crisis he had created, the same person whose position he had eliminated 6 weeks earlier as part of his efficiency optimization initiative. The security deficiency notice arrived via certified mail on Friday morning, carrying the official seal of the Defense Security Service and the bureaucratic weight of 16 pages, detailing Apex's failures to maintain adequate security oversight.
Jake Morrison signed for the document personally, recognizing that his signature was acknowledging receipt of what amounted to a corporate death sentence, unless immediate action could restore their security compliance. The deficiencies listed in the formal notice were comprehensive and damning. Apex had failed to maintain current personnel security files for cleared employees, had no documented procedures for classified material accountability, lacked proper facility security measures for their sensitive compartmented information facility, and had eliminated their designated facility security officer position without notification to appropriate government authorities. Each deficiency carried specific remediation requirements and established timelines for compliance verification. The most critical findings centered on the absence of a qualified FSO, which the notice identified as a fundamental violation of the security agreement that governed Apex's access to classified contracts. Jake convened an emergency meeting of Apex's senior leadership team, including CEO David Chen, Chief Financial Officer Lisa Rodriguez, and Business Development Director Michael Park. The conference room fell silent as Jake read through the key findings and explained their implications for the company's immediate future. David Chen had founded Apex Defense Solutions 22 years earlier, building the company from a small engineering consultancy into a respected mid-tier defense contractor. He possessed enough experience in government contracting to understand immediately that the situation Jake had created threatened the company's survival. The financial mathematics were stark and unforgiving. Classified contracts generated $8 million in monthly revenue for Apex, representing 63% of their total business. If their facility security clearance was suspended, this revenue stream would disappear entirely while their fixed costs remained unchanged. Lisa Rodriguez calculated that Apex could sustain operations without classified contract revenue for approximately 4 months before facing serious cash flow problems. Beyond that timeline, they would need to consider layoffs, facility reductions, and potentially filing for bankruptcy protection if their security clearance couldn't be restored. Michael Park explained that their classified contracts contained specific security compliance clauses that would trigger immediate termination if Apex's security clearance was suspended. These weren't simply revenue delays that could be recovered later. They were permanent losses of contracted work that had taken years to secure and would require complete recompetition if their clearances were eventually restored. The conversation that followed was tense and increasingly focused on accountability. David Chen asked Jake to explain his reasoning for eliminating the FSO position without understanding its relationship to their classified contract. The cost savings that had seemed so attractive in Jake's presentation now appeared trivial compared to the potential revenue losses his decision had created. Jake attempted to defend his analysis by emphasizing that CyberShield Security Solutions had presented comprehensive capabilities and strong references from satisfied clients. He argued that the Pentagon's requirements seemed unnecessarily complex and suggested that government bureaucracy was preventing efficient security management. David Chen's response was measured but firm. The Pentagon's requirements weren't bureaucratic obstacles. They were legal mandates that governed access to classified information and contracts worth billions of dollars annually across the defense industry. Apex had built their business by understanding and meticulously following these requirements, not by attempting to circumvent them through commercial solutions. The meeting concluded with Jake receiving a direct assignment to identify immediate options for restoring Apex's security compliance within the 30-day remediation timeline. This meant finding a qualified facility security officer who possessed appropriate clearances and could assume responsibility for addressing every deficiency listed in the formal notice. Jake's subsequent research into the defense contractor employment market revealed the magnitude of the challenge he faced. Qualified FSOs with top-secret SI clearances and Pentagon facility access were extremely rare and typically employed by major defense contractors who offered competitive salaries and comprehensive benefits packages. The few qualified candidates who were available expected annual compensation packages exceeding $160,000, required substantial signing bonuses to offset the risks associated with changing cleared position, demanded employment contracts that protected them from arbitrary termination decisions, like the one that had created Apex's current crisis. More problematically, even qualified candidates would require several weeks to complete the administrative processes necessary to transfer their clearances to Apex and assume responsibility for the company's classified contract. The security clearance transfer process involved background verification, facility security briefings, and coordination with multiple government offices that operated according to their own bureaucratic timeline. Jake realized that recruiting an external FSO, even if successful, would likely exceed the 30-day remediation deadline and cost significantly more than the position he had eliminated. The financial benefits of his efficiency initiative had evaporated entirely, replaced by emergency recruitment costs and the looming threat of suspended operation. 3 days into his search for qualified candidates, Jake received a call from Colonel Patricia Hayes, requesting a status update on Apex's remediation effort. The conversation was brief and professional, but Colonel Hayes made clear that the Defense Security Service was monitoring Apex's progress closely and expected concrete evidence of corrective action within the established timeline. The pressure of approaching deadlines and mounting costs eventually forced Jake to confront the solution he had been avoiding. Sarah Mitchell remained the most qualified candidate for restoring Apex's security compliance, and she was immediately available because her clearances were currently inactive, rather than assigned to another contractor. Jake's first attempt to contact Sarah was deliberately indirect. He sent a brief email suggesting that Apex might benefit from consulting services related to security compliance and asking whether she would be interested in discussing temporary support arrangements. His approach was carefully worded to avoid any admission that eliminating her position had been a mistake. Sarah's response arrived within 2 hours and consisted of a single sentence: "I'm aware of your current situation through professional channels and would be willing to discuss permanent solutions if you're interested in addressing the underlying issue." The phrasing of her response made clear that Sarah understood exactly what had happened at Apex and why Jake was contacting her. She wasn't interested in providing temporary consulting services that would allow him to maintain the fiction that his efficiency initiative had been successful. If Apex wanted her expertise, they would need to acknowledge that eliminating her position had been a fundamental error. Jake scheduled a meeting for the following morning, choosing a neutral conference room at a hotel near Apex's offices, rather than inviting Sarah back to the company facilities she had been forced to leave. He arrived with a folder containing the security deficiency notice, hoping that reviewing the specific requirements would demonstrate that Apex's needs could be addressed through limited consulting rather than full employment restoration. Sarah arrived precisely on time, dressed in the same professional business attire she had worn throughout her 16 years at Apex. She listened patiently as Jake explained the Pentagon's findings and described the remediation requirements that needed to be addressed within the remaining 24 days. When Jake finished his presentation, Sarah asked a single question that cut directly to the heart of the matter: "Are you offering me my position back, or are you asking me to fix the problems you created so that someone else can take credit for the solution?" The directness of her question forced Jake to confront the reality that his approach had been fundamentally flawed from the beginning. Sarah wasn't simply a technical resource who could be hired temporarily to address specific compliance issues. She was the former facility security officer whose elimination had created the crisis, and restoring Apex's security posture would require acknowledging that her original role had been essential rather than redundant. Jake attempted to negotiate middle ground, suggesting that Sarah could return as a contractor with enhanced compensation to address the immediate compliance issues, after which Apex could evaluate longer-term security management options. Sarah declined this proposal immediately, explaining that her security clearances required employment stability and that serving as a contractor would not provide the authority necessary to implement comprehensive solutions. The conversation continued for another hour, with Jake gradually recognizing that his negotiating position was essentially non-existent. Apex needed Sarah's expertise more urgently than she needed employment with a company that had demonstrated so little understanding of her value. The balance of power had shifted completely since the morning he had terminated her position with such confidence in his efficiency improvement. Sarah's final statement was delivered with calm professionalism that made its impact even more significant. Jake, you eliminated my position because you thought security compliance was a cost center that could be optimized away. Now you're discovering that it was actually a profit center that protected 60% of your revenue. If you want me to fix this situation, you'll need to demonstrate that you understand the difference. The weekend following Jake's unsuccessful meeting with Sarah Mitchell marked a turning point in Apex Defense Solutions' crisis. With 22 days remaining in their remediation timeline, Jake Morrison faced the uncomfortable reality that his options had narrowed to a single humbling choice: convincing Sarah to return on her terms, or watching the company lose its classified contract. David Chen called an emergency board meeting for Sunday afternoon, assembling the 5 directors who had enthusiastically approved Jake's efficiency initiative 3 months earlier. The conference room atmosphere was markedly different from the celebratory mood that had accompanied Jake's original presentation. This time, the charts and graphs displayed potential revenue losses rather than projected savings. Jake presented his analysis of the recruitment market for qualified facility security officers, acknowledging that external candidates would require both higher compensation than Sarah's original salary and longer onboarding timelines than their remediation deadline allowed. He also reported on his initial contact with Sarah and her apparent unwillingness to accept temporary consulting arrangement. Board member Patricia Williams, who served as chairman of Apex's audit committee, asked the question that everyone was thinking. Jake, help me understand how we went from celebrating cost savings to facing potential bankruptcy in less than 4 months. The question forced Jake to walk through his decision-making process step by step, revealing the fundamental assumptions that had led to Sarah's termination. He had treated security compliance as a generic business function that could be optimized through standard efficiency measures, rather than recognizing it as a specialized capability that was integral to Apex's competitive advantage. Board member Robert Chang, who had 20 years of experience in government contracting before joining Apex's board, provided context that Jake had never considered. Defense contractors, Chang explained, were essentially trust-based businesses, where relationships and reliability mattered more than cost efficiency. The Pentagon awarded contracts to companies they trusted to protect classified information and deliver sensitive capabilities without security incidents. Sarah Mitchell hadn't just been processing paperwork for 16 years, she had been building and maintaining the trust relationships that allowed Apex to compete for classified contracts. Her personal reputation with Pentagon security officers, her understanding of evolving compliance requirements, and her track record of zero security incidents were assets that couldn't be replaced through outsourcing or automation. Chang's assessment was stark. We didn't eliminate a cost center. We eliminated our competitive differentiation, the most profitable segment of our business. The board meeting concluded with unanimous agreement that restoring Sarah's position was the only viable option for preserving Apex's classified contract capability. However, they also recognized that the negotiating dynamics had changed dramatically since her termination. Sarah now held all the leverage, and Apex would need to offer terms that reflected both her increased value and the urgency of their situation. David Chen authorized Jake to pursue renewed negotiations with Sarah, but established clear parameters for the discussion. Apex was prepared to restore her original position with enhanced authority, increased compensation, and contractual protections that would prevent future arbitrary termination decisions. Jake spent Monday morning crafting a formal offer letter that attempted to balance Apex's immediate needs with Sarah's apparent desire for recognition that her original termination had been a mistake. The position title was upgraded to Chief Security Officer, reporting directly to the CEO, rather than through Jake's operations division. The salary represented a 30% increase over her previous compensation, with additional performance bonuses tied to successful contract renewals and security compliance metrics. Most significantly, the offer included a clause requiring board approval for any future changes to the security compliance organization, effectively preventing another operations director from unilaterally eliminating Sarah's position based on misunderstanding of its importance. Sarah agreed to meet Tuesday afternoon at Apex's offices, marking her first return to the building since her termination 6 weeks earlier. Jake waited in the lobby to escort her personally, noting that several former colleagues recognized her and seemed pleased to see her return. The meeting took place in David Chen's office,
with Jake present as an observer rather than a primary participant. Chen opened the conversation by acknowledging directly that eliminating Sarah's position had been a serious error in judgment that threatened the company's future. He emphasized that the board had authorized him to negotiate whatever terms were necessary to restore Apex's security compliance and preserve their classified contract. Sarah reviewed the offer letter carefully, asking detailed questions about the reporting structure, performance expectations, and authority levels associated with the chief security officer position. Her questions demonstrated thorough understanding of the organizational changes that would be necessary to prevent future misunderstandings about security compliance requirements. The negotiation that followed was professional but pointed. Sarah wanted assurance that her recommendations regarding security matters would carry decisive weight in corporate decision-making, rather than being subject to cost-benefit analyses by operations personnel who lacked relevant expertise. She also requested authority to rebuild relationships with Pentagon security officers that had been damaged by Apex's apparent abandonment of proper security oversight. This would require travel budget for face-to-face meetings, conference attendance for professional development, and flexible scheduling to accommodate the unpredictable timing of government security requirements. David Chen agreed to these requests without hesitation, recognizing that Sarah's demands were reasonable responses to the situation that Jake's decisions had created. The enhanced authority and resources she was requesting were necessary tools for repairing the damage that had been done to Apex's security posture. The most difficult aspect of the negotiation involved timeline expectations for resolving the security deficiency note. Sarah explained that restoring her clearance access would require several days of administrative processing, during which she would have limited ability to address the documented compliance gaps. Once her clearances were reactivated, she would need to conduct comprehensive reviews of all classified contracts, rebuild documentation that had been lost when her access was terminated, and coordinate with Pentagon security offices to demonstrate that Apex had restored appropriate oversight capability. Sarah estimated that achieving full compliance with the remediation requirements would require approximately 6 weeks of intensive work, extending well beyond the 30-day deadline that the Defense Security Service had established. This meant that Apex would likely need to request an extension of their remediation timeline, acknowledging that they couldn't meet the original deadlines due to the time required to restore proper security management. David Chen accepted this assessment, recognizing that requesting an extension was preferable to attempting rushed compliance that might fail under government scrutiny. Sarah's reputation with Pentagon security officers would be crucial for obtaining the additional time that Apex needed to demonstrate genuine corrective action. The meeting concluded with Sarah accepting the Chief Security Officer position, effective immediately pending completion of security clearance reactivation procedure. Jake was tasked with coordinating the administrative requirements for her return, including office assignment, system access, restoration, and coordination with government security offices. Walking Sarah to her new office after the meeting, Jake attempted to offer a personal apology for the disruption his decisions had caused. Sarah's response was gracious but clear. "Jake, I understand that you were trying to improve efficiency. The problem was that you optimized away something you didn't understand. Let's focus on making sure that doesn't happen again." That afternoon, Sarah began the process of reactivating her security clearances and restoring her access to the classified systems that governed Apex's most valuable contract. The work ahead would be challenging and time-sensitive, but for the first time since receiving the security deficiency notice, Apex had reason for cautious optimism about their ability to preserve their classified contract capability. Sarah Mitchell's first day back at Apex Defense Solutions began at 5:30 a.m. with a secure phone call to Colonel Patricia Hayes at the Pentagon Security Office. The conversation was brief and focused. Sarah needed to report her return to Apex as Chief Security Officer and request an emergency meeting to discuss the company's remediation efforts. Colonel Hayes's response was measured but encouraging. She had been concerned about Apex's apparent abandonment of proper security oversight, and was relieved to learn that they had restored qualified leadership to their security compliance organization. She agreed to meet with Sarah the following morning to review their current status and discuss potential timeline adjustments for addressing the documented deficiency. The call represented the beginning of Sarah's effort to rebuild the professional relationships that had been damaged when Apex eliminated their facility's security officer position. These relationships were built on personal trust and demonstrated competence over time. They couldn't be restored through paperwork or presentations, only through consistent performance and reliable communication. Sarah spent her first morning conducting a comprehensive audit of Apex's current security posture, documenting exactly what had been lost during the 6 weeks since her departure. The results were worse than she had anticipated. CyberShield Security Solutions had maintained excellent cybersecurity protection for Apex's commercial operations, but the classified contract management systems had essentially been abandoned. Classified material accountability records were 6 weeks out of date, with no documentation of restricted documents that had been received, processed, or transmitted during that period. Personnel security files for cleared employees had not been updated to reflect clearance renewal requirements, travel notifications, or lifestyle changes that could affect security eligibility. Most critically, Apex's sensitive compartmented information facility had been operating without proper oversight for classified material handling procedure. While no security breaches had occurred, the facility was technically out of compliance with multiple requirements that governed access controls, visitor procedures, and classified material storage. Sarah's audit revealed that addressing these deficiencies would require immediate action across multiple areas. She needed to rebuild documentation systems that had been neglected, restore relationships with government security offices that had been damaged by apparent abandonment of proper oversight, and implement new procedures that would prevent future compliance failure. The meeting with Colonel Hayes took place Wednesday morning at the Pentagon, in a secure conference room that Sarah had visited many times during her 16 years as Apex's F. The familiar environment was both comforting and sobering. It reminded her of the professional relationships she had built over time, and the trust that Apex had temporarily forfeited through poor decision-making. Colonel Hayes reviewed the security deficiency notice findings in detail, explaining that each documented gap represented a potential pathway for unauthorized access to classified information. The Pentagon's concern wasn't primarily punitive. They needed assurance that Apex could reliably protect sensitive information before they could continue receiving classified contracts. Sarah presented her preliminary assessment of Apex's current status and her plan for comprehensive remediation. The timeline she proposed was realistic but ambitious: 6 weeks to fully address all documented deficiencies and demonstrate sustained compliance with government security requirements. Colonel Hayes appreciated Sarah's thorough approach and agreed to extend Apex's remediation deadline by 4 weeks, provided they could demonstrate meaningful progress on addressing the most critical findings within the original 30-day timeline. This compromise would allow Apex to continue operating while implementing proper corrective measures. The extended timeline came with additional oversight requirements. Pentagon security officers would conduct weekly progress reviews to verify that Apex was making genuine improvements rather than simply promising future compliance. Sarah welcomed this enhanced scrutiny, recognizing that it represented an opportunity to rebuild trust through demonstrated performance. Returning to Apex that afternoon, Sarah briefed David Chen and the senior leadership team on her discussions with Pentagon security officers. The extended timeline was encouraging, but the additional oversight requirements meant that every aspect of their remediation efforts would be subject to government review and evaluation. Sarah also addressed the organizational changes that would be necessary to prevent future security compliance failures. The security organization needed clear authority to override operational decisions that could compromise classified contract requirements, and security considerations needed to be integrated into all strategic planning processes. Jake Morrison attended these briefings as part of his operational responsibilities, but his role in security-related decisions had been effectively eliminated. The board's decision to place security compliance under direct CEO oversight removed Jake's authority to make changes that could affect classified contract management. The following weeks were intensive and demanding, as Sarah worked to rebuild Apex's security compliance capability. She spent long days updating documentation, coordinating with government security offices, and implementing new procedures that would ensure continuous compliance with evolving requirements. The weekly progress reviews with Pentagon security officers went well, demonstrating that Apex was making substantial improvements under Sarah's leadership. Each meeting built additional confidence that the company had genuinely restored proper security oversight rather than implementing superficial changes designed to satisfy immediate requirements. By the end of the extended remediation period, Apex had not only addressed all documented deficiencies but had implemented enhanced security measures that exceeded their previous capability. Sarah's systematic approach had transformed a compliance crisis into an opportunity for organizational improvement. The final compliance verification meeting took place on a Friday morning in November, with Colonel Hayes and 2 additional Pentagon security specialists conducting a comprehensive review of Apex's restored security posture. The evaluation covered every aspect of their classified contract management capabilities, from personnel security procedures to facilities security measures. The results were unambiguous. Apex had fully restored their security compliance and demonstrated capabilities that positioned them favorably for future classified contract opportunities. Colonel Hayes formally notified the Defense Security Service that Apex's security deficiencies had been resolved and that their facility security clearance should be restored to full operational status. That afternoon, David Chen called a company-wide meeting to announce the successful resolution of their security compliance issues and to publicly recognize Sarah's leadership in preserving Apex's classified contract capability. The applause that followed was genuine and sustained, reflecting everyone's understanding of how close the company had come to losing its most valuable business relationship. Jake Morrison remained with Apex for another 2 months before accepting a position with a commercial technology company, where his efficiency optimization skills would be more appropriately applied. His departure was amicable, with mutual recognition that his expertise was better suited to commercial operations than defense contracting. Sarah's success in resolving the compliance crisis led to additional responsibilities and recognition within the defense contracting community. Her reputation as a skilled security professional was enhanced by her handling of a difficult situation, opening opportunities for consulting work and industry leadership roles. 6 months later, Apex secured 2 new classified contracts worth $47 million combined, with Pentagon program managers specifically citing the company's excellent security compliance record as a factor in their selection. The contracts represented validation that Sarah's efforts had not only preserved existing business but had positioned Apex for future growth in the classified contract market. The crisis that had threatened Apex's survival ultimately strengthened the company by demonstrating the critical importance of specialized expertise and proper security oversight. The lessons learned during those challenging months informed strategic planning processes and ensured that security considerations would never again be treated as secondary concerns in operational decision-making. The classified secure terminal in Sarah's new office hummed to life at precisely 6:15 a.m. on her 3rd day back at Apex Defense Solutions. The familiar green glow of the encrypted display represented more than just technology. It symbolized her restored access to the intricate web of classified communications that formed the backbone of America's defense contracting network. Sarah's fingers moved across the keyboard with practiced efficiency as she logged into systems she hadn't accessed since her termination 2 months earlier. Each database contained pieces of the comprehensive picture she needed to rebuild: contract specifications, security requirements, compliance deadlines, and communication records that would reveal exactly what had transpired in her absence. The first shock came from the Pentagon contract management database, where she discovered that 3 classified projects had received automated compliance warnings during the period when Apex lacked proper security oversight.
These warnings hadn't reached anyone at the company because they were transmitted through secure channels that required FSO-level clearances to access. Project Nighthawk, a $23 million radar enhancement contract, had missed 2 quarterly security briefings that were mandatory for continued participation. The automated system had flagged Apex's non-attendance and escalated the matter to human reviewers who were now questioning the company's commitment to the program. Project Shadowmere, involving secure communications equipment worth $31 million over 3 years, had failed to submit updated security protocols after a personnel change notification. The missing documentation had triggered a compliance review that could result in contract suspension if not resolved within 10 days. Most concerning was Project Darkwater, a highly classified submarine detection system worth $89 million, where Apex's failure to maintain proper security liaison had resulted in their exclusion from 3 critical design meetings. The program manager had noted Apex's absence in official records and was reportedly considering whether to redistribute their work package to more reliable contractors. Sarah printed each compliance notification and began constructing a comprehensive timeline of missed requirements, documenting not just what had been overlooked, but why the failures had occurred, and what would be required to restore Apex's standing on each project. The pattern was consistent across all affected contracts. Pentagon program managers had attempted to maintain normal communication through secure channels, but with no qualified FSO to receive and process these communications. Apex had effectively gone silent from the government's perspective. Her next priority was accessing the personnel security database to review the clearance status of Apex's cleared employees. The results revealed additional problems that would require immediate attention. 4 employees had clearance renewals pending that required FSO endorsement and submission. Without these endorsements, their clearances would lapse, making them ineligible to work on classified projects. 2 employees had submitted foreign travel notifications that required security review and approval before their planned trip. The unprocessed notifications meant they were technically in violation of their clearance requirements, potentially jeopardizing their security eligibility. Another employee had experienced a significant life change, a marriage to a foreign national that required comprehensive security investigation and updated background documentation. The failure to report and process this change could result in automatic clearance suspension if discovered during a routine audit. Sarah spent the remainder of her first week systematically addressing each personnel security issue, working 16-hour days to process backlogged paperwork and restore Apex's compliance with individual clearance requirements. Each case required careful documentation and often involved lengthy phone calls with government security offices to explain the circumstances and request expedited processing. The facility security review revealed equally serious problems. Apex's sensitive compartmented information facility had been operating without proper daily security checks, visitor access logs, or classified material inventory update. While no security breaches had occurred, the facility was technically out of compliance with multiple regulations that governed classified information handling. Sarah discovered that during her absence, several cleared employees had been accessing the SLF using emergency procedures that bypassed normal security protocol. These exceptions were supposed to be temporary and required FSO approval within 24 hours. But without an FSO present, the exceptions had become routine practice. The classified material accountability system showed gaps that made Sarah's stomach tighten with concern. Documents had been checked out of the secure storage system but not properly logged back in. Some classified materials showed no record of current location or responsible individual. The accountability failures represented serious security violations that could result in individual clearance suspensions and corporate sanctions. Working through the weekend, Sarah began the painstaking process of physically locating every piece of classified material and reconstructing accurate accountability records. The work required searching through individual offices, secure storage areas, and active project files to ensure that every classified document could be properly accounted for. By Sunday evening, she had located all missing materials and discovered that most of the accountability failures resulted from rushed project deadlines, during which normal security procedures had been abbreviated. The materials were secure, but the documentation gaps represented procedural violations that needed to be reported and corrected. Monday morning brought Sarah's first meeting with Pentagon program managers since her return. The secure video conference included representatives from all 3 projects that had experienced compliance issues during her absence. The tone was professional but clearly concerned about Apex's apparent disregard for security requirements. Major Jennifer Walsh, who managed Project Nighthawk, opened the discussion by expressing disappointment that Apex had missed mandatory security briefings without explanation. She explained that program security briefings weren't optional meetings, but required compliance activities that demonstrated contractor commitment to protecting classified information. Sarah acknowledged the failures directly and explained the circumstances that had led to Apex's communication breakdown. She emphasized that the company had restored proper security oversight and was implementing enhanced procedures to prevent future compliance failure. Commander Richard Torres from Project Shadowmere was more pointed in his concern. He noted that Apex's failure to maintain security liaison had created uncertainty about the company's reliability and questioned whether they possessed the organizational stability necessary for long-term classified work. Sarah presented her comprehensive remediation plan, detailing the specific steps Apex was taking to address each identified deficiency. She provided timeline commitments for completing outstanding requirements and establishing new communication protocols that would ensure continuous compliance monitoring. The most challenging discussion involved Captain Maria Gonzalez from Project Darkwater, who explained that Apex's exclusion from design meetings had created knowledge gaps that might be difficult to bridge. The missed meetings had covered critical technical specifications that were fundamental to the company's future contributions to the project. Sarah requested access to classified meeting summaries and technical documentation that would allow Apex's engineering team to understand what they had missed during the communication breakdown. Captain Gonzalez agreed to provide this information but noted that future absences would likely result in permanent exclusion from the program. The video conference concluded with cautious optimism from the Pentagon representative. They appreciated Sarah's direct acknowledgement of the problems and her comprehensive approach to remediation. However, they also made clear that Apex's future participation in classified programs would depend on demonstrated improvement in security compliance and communication. That afternoon, Sarah briefed David Chen and the senior leadership team on her findings and the commitments she had made to Pentagon program manager. The scope of the problems was larger than anyone had anticipated, but the remediation plan she had developed was achievable if the company committed necessary resources and executive attention. David Chen authorized whatever expenditures were necessary to restore Apex's security compliance, recognizing that the cost of remediation was minimal compared to the potential loss of classified contract. He also established weekly executive reviews of security compliance status to ensure that the problems would never again be allowed to accumulate unnoticed. The following weeks tested Sarah's organizational skills and stamina as she worked systematically through each compliance requirement, while maintaining normal security operations for ongoing projects. Her days began at 5:30 a.m. with secure communications from Pentagon offices and often extended past 10 hours. She processed paperwork and coordinated with government security personnel. The intensive schedule was sustainable only because Sarah understood exactly what needed to be accomplished and had the authority to prioritize security requirements over other corporate activity. When conflicts arose between operational efficiency and security compliance, her decisions carried the full weight of CEO endorsement. 3 weeks into the remediation effort, Sarah received a call from Colonel Hayes, requesting an update on Apex's progress. The conversation was encouraging. Pentagon security offices had noticed the increased communication from Apex and were satisfied that the company was genuinely addressing their compliance deficiency. Colonel Hayes also mentioned that other defense contractors had inquired about Apex's situation, suggesting that word had spread through the industry about their security compliance problem. Sarah's successful remediation efforts were being watched by competitors who were curious about whether Apex would survive the crisis or lose market share to more reliable contractors. The first test of Apex's restored security capabilities came on a rain-soaked Thursday morning in late November when an unexpected Pentagon security inspection team arrived without advance notice. Unscheduled inspections were rare but not unprecedented. They represented the government's ultimate verification that contractors were maintaining consistent security standards, rather than simply preparing for announced review. Sarah received notification of the team's arrival while reviewing classified correspondence in her office. The call came from Apex's front desk security reporting that 3 individuals with Pentagon credentials were requesting access to conduct immediate facility security verification. Sarah authorized their entry and began the mental checklist of everything that would be examined during an unscheduled inspection. The team was led by Lieutenant Colonel Michael Stevens, a career security officer whom Sarah had worked with on several previous audits during her original tenure at APE. His presence was both reassuring and concerning. The Pentagon wouldn't send senior personnel for routine verification unless they had specific reasons for heightened scrutiny. Lieutenant Colonel Stevens explained that the unscheduled inspection was prompted by reports from multiple program managers, indicating significant improvement in Apex's security communication and compliance performance. The inspection would verify whether these improvements represented genuine organizational change or temporary measures designed to address immediate concerns. The inspection began with a comprehensive review of Apex's classified material accountability system. Sarah presented the reconstructed inventory records that documented every piece of classified information in the facility, along with checkout logs, access records, and destruction certificates for materials that had been properly disposed of, according to security protocol. The inspection team spent 2 hours examining individual files, cross-referencing documentation with physical materials, and testing the procedural knowledge of cleared employees who handled classified information daily. Their questions were detailed and technical, designed to reveal whether Apex's security procedures were being followed consistently or only during periods of heightened attention. Sarah's confidence grew as the inspection progressed. The intensive remediation work she had completed over the previous month had not only addressed documented deficiencies, but had created more robust systems than Apex had maintained during her original tenure. The crisis had forced comprehensive improvement rather than simple compliance restoration. The personnel security review examined individual clearance files, renewal documentation, and the procedures Apex used to monitor ongoing security eligibility of cleared employees. Lieutenant Colonel Stevens was particularly interested in the foreign travel notification system and the processes for handling life changes that could affect security clearance. Sarah demonstrated the new automated tracking system she had implemented, which provided real-time visibility into clearance renewal timelines, training requirements, and reporting obligations for each cleared employee. The system eliminated the possibility of inadvertent compliance failures by generating automatic reminders and escalation procedures.
The facility's security examination covered physical security measures, access controls, visitor procedures, and the technical security systems that protected classified information from unauthorized disclosure. The inspection team tested badge readers, examined secure storage areas, and reviewed maintenance records for security equipment. The most challenging aspect of the inspection involved the sensitive compartmented information facility, where classified materials were processed and stored according to stringent physical security requirements. Lieutenant Colonel Stevens examined construction specifications, environmental controls, acoustic protection measures, and the procedures that governed access to the most sensitive information. Sarah had spent considerable time ensuring that the SIF met all current requirements, updating procedures that had become outdated and implementing new controls that exceeded minimum standards. The investment in facility improvements had been substantial, but the enhanced security capabilities positioned Apex favorably for future classified contracts requiring higher levels of protection. The inspection concluded with individual interviews of key personnel who handled classified information. These conversations allowed the inspection team to assess whether security awareness and compliance commitment extended throughout the organization, rather than being concentrated solely in the security office. Lieutenant Colonel Stevens interviewed Jake Morrison as part of his review of management understanding of security requirements. The conversation was brief but revealing. Jake's responses demonstrated that he had gained significant appreciation for the complexity of defense contractor security requirements and the specialized expertise required for effective compliance management. The final briefing took place in David Chen's office, with Sarah and Jake present to receive the inspection team's findings. Lieutenant Colonel Stevens began by acknowledging that Apex had demonstrated remarkable improvement in security compliance capabilities over a relatively short period. The inspection had revealed no significant deficiencies and had identified several areas where Apex's security measures exceeded standard industry practice. The automated tracking systems, enhanced facility security measures, and comprehensive training programs represented best practices that other contractors could benefit from adopting. Most importantly, the inspection team had confirmed that Apex's security improvements represented genuine organizational change rather than temporary compliance theater. The commitment to security excellence was evident throughout the organization, from senior leadership support to individual employee awareness of their security responsibility. Lieutenant Colonel Stevens concluded by recommending that Apex's facility security clearance be restored to full operational status without restrictions or enhanced oversight requirements. The recommendation would be forwarded to the Defense Security Service for formal approval, but the inspection findings supported complete confidence in Apex's security capability. After the inspection team departed, David Chen convened an impromptu celebration in the main conference room, inviting all cleared employees to acknowledge the successful completion of their security remediation effort. The gathering was both relief and recognition that the company had emerged from its crisis stronger than before. Sarah used the occasion to thank everyone who had contributed to the remediation effort, emphasizing that security compliance was a team responsibility that required ongoing attention from everyone who handled classified information. The crisis had demonstrated the importance of security awareness throughout the organization, not just within the dedicated security function. The following week brought formal notification from the Defense Security Service that Apex's facility security clearance had been fully restored. The letter included commendation for the company's comprehensive approach to addressing compliance deficiencies and implementing enhanced security measures that positioned them as a model for other contractors. Pentagon program managers began reaching out to schedule meetings about future classified opportunities. Word had spread through the defense community that Apex had not only survived their security crisis but had emerged with enhanced capabilities that made them attractive partners for sensitive programs. Major Walsh from Project Nighthawk called to discuss expanding Apex's role in radar enhancement work, noting that their demonstrated commitment to security compliance made them suitable for additional responsibilities within the classified program. The conversation represented validation that Apex's reputation had been fully restored within the Pentagon community. Commander Torres from Project Shadowmere extended an invitation for Apex to participate in a new classified communications program that required contractors with exceptional security standards. The opportunity represented potential revenue of $43 million over 4 years and would establish Apex as a preferred partner for advanced communication systems. Most significantly, Captain Gonzalez from Project Darkwater requested a meeting to discuss expanding Apex's involvement in submarine detection technology. The classified program was entering a new phase that required additional contractor support, and Apex's enhanced security capabilities made them eligible for consideration. The secure conference room on the Pentagon's 3rd floor had hosted thousands of contractor briefings over the decades, but the meeting scheduled for December 15 carried special significance for Apex Defense Solutions. Sarah Mitchell sat at the polished table across from 3 Pentagon program managers who collectively controlled over $200 million in classified contracts, representing an opportunity that exceeded Apex's entire current contract portfolio. Colonel Patricia Hayes had arranged the meeting specifically to discuss Apex's potential participation in emerging classified programs that required contractors with demonstrated security. The invitation itself represented validation that Apex's reputation had been fully restored and that they were now considered among the most reliable partners in the defense contracting community. Major Jennifer Walsh opened the briefing by reviewing Project Nighthawk's evolution into a broader radar technology initiative that would require significant expansion of contractor support. The original $23 million contract had proven successful enough to justify a follow-on program worth $67 million over 5 years, with Apex positioned as the primary contractor based on their technical performance and security compliance record. The expanded radar program would involve classified technologies that required top-secret special access program clearances, representing a level of classification beyond what Apex had previously handled. Sarah's security credentials qualified her to oversee SAP-level contracts, but implementing the additional security measures would require substantial facility upgrades and personnel security enhancement. Commander Richard Torres presented the details of an advanced communications program that would integrate secure satellite technology with ground-based systems. The classified nature of the work required contractors with specialized facility security capabilities and a track record of handling sensitive intelligence information without security. Apex's recent security improvements had positioned them favorably for consideration, but the program's requirements would test their capabilities in new ways. The contract would require dedicated sensitive compartmented information facilities with enhanced physical security measures and specialized personnel who possessed both technical expertise and appropriate security. Captain Maria Gonzalez outlined the most significant opportunity: participation in a joint Navy-Air Force submarine detection program that represented the cutting edge of underwater surveillance technology. The classified program involved coordination with intelligence agencies and required contractors with the highest levels of security clearance and demonstrated reliability. The submarine detection program alone was worth $106 million over 7 years, but participation required establishing new categories of security clearances, implementing specialized facilities security measures, and accepting enhanced oversight from multiple government agencies. The technical and security challenges were substantial, but successful participation would establish Apex as a premier defense contractor capable of handling the most sensitive military programs. Sarah listened carefully to each presentation, taking detailed notes about security requirements, facility specifications, and personnel clearance needs. The opportunities were transformational for Apex, but they would require significant investment in security infrastructure and organizational capabilities that extended well beyond their current capacity. The meeting concluded with Colonel Hayes explaining the selection process for classified program participation, technical capability was essential, but security reliability was the determining factor for programs involving sensitive information. Apex's demonstrated recovery from their compliance crisis had actually enhanced their reputation by proving their commitment to security excellence under pressure. The Pentagon would issue formal requests for proposals within 60 days, allowing Apex time to prepare comprehensive responses that addressed both technical requirements and security capability. Sarah would play a crucial role in developing the security aspects of each proposal, demonstrating how Apex would protect classified information and maintain compliance with specialized program requirements. Returning to Arlington that afternoon, Sarah briefed David Chen and the senior leadership team on the magnitude of the opportunities that were emerging from Apex's enhanced security reputation. The potential contracts represented nearly triple their current annual revenue, but pursuing them would require substantial organizational growth and security infrastructure investment. David Chen authorized the development of comprehensive responses to all three opportunities, recognizing that Apex's future competitive position depended on establishing themselves as a trusted partner for the most sensitive defense program. The investment required for facility upgrades, personnel expansion, and security enhancements would be substantial, but the potential returns justified the risk. Sarah began developing detailed implementation plans for each security requirement, working with facility architects, security equipment vendors, and personnel security specialists to ensure that Apex could meet the stringent standards required for classified program participation. The facility upgrades alone would cost nearly $2 million, including construction of additional sensitive compartmented information facilities, installation of specialized security equipment, and implementation of physical security measures that exceeded current standards. The investment represented a significant commitment to Apex's future in classified contracting. Personnel security requirements would necessitate recruiting additional cleared employees and obtaining specialized clearances for existing staff. The process would take months to complete and would require substantial investment in background investigations, security training, and clearance maintenance programs. Sarah also began rebuilding the professional relationships that would be essential for success in classified programs. She attended industry conferences, participated in security professional organizations, and maintained regular communication with Pentagon security officers who would evaluate Apex's proposals. The intensive preparation work continued through the winter months as Sarah developed comprehensive security plans that addressed every aspect of classified program participation. The documents she produced demonstrated not only compliance with minimum requirements, but implementation of best practices that positioned Apex as a security leader within the defense contracting community. In February, the first request for proposal arrived for the expanded radar technology program. Sarah's security plan comprised 47 pages of detailed procedures, facility specifications, and personnel security measures that exceeded the government's minimum requirement. The comprehensive approach reflected lessons learned during Apex's security crisis and positioned them favorably for selection. The communications program RFP followed 3 weeks later with similarly demanding security requirements that tested Apex's enhanced capability. Sarah's response demonstrated creative solutions to complex security challenges while maintaining strict compliance with classified information protection requirements. The submarine detection program RFP was the most challenging, requiring security measures that approached the standards used by intelligence agencies for their most sensitive operations. Sarah's response included facility designs, security procedures, and personnel management plans that represented the pinnacle of commercial security capability. The notification call came at 7:23 a.m. on a crisp Monday morning in March, exactly 11 months after Jake Morrison had terminated Sarah Mitchell's position in pursuit of operational efficiency. Colonel Patricia Hayes was calling personally to deliver news that would fundamentally alter Apex Defense Solutions' position within the defense contracting industry. Apex had been selected as the primary contractor for all three classified programs, representing a combined contract value of $26 million over the next 7 years. The selection was based on a combination of technical excellence and security capabilities that the evaluation committee had deemed exceptional among all competing proposals. Colonel Hayes explained that Sarah's comprehensive security plans had set new standards for contractor security excellence, demonstrating innovative approaches to classified information protection that exceeded government expectations. The evaluation committee had been particularly impressed by Apex's commitment to continuous security improvement and their proven ability to recover from challenges while implementing enhanced capability. The radar technology contract would begin immediately, with initial work focusing on facility preparation and personnel security clearance processing. The communications program would commence in 6 months, allowing time for Apex to complete necessary security infrastructure upgrades. The submarine detection program would start in 12 months, providing adequate time to implement the most demanding security requirements. Sarah's role would expand significantly to oversee security compliance across all 3 programs, requiring her to manage a team of security professionals and coordinate with multiple government agencies. The position would establish her as one of the most senior security executives in the defense contracting industry. David Chen assembled the entire company for an announcement meeting that afternoon, using the main conference room and video connections to include employees who were traveling or working at remote locations.
The gathering represented the largest company meeting in Apex's history, reflecting the significance of their contract awards. The announcement was met with sustained applause and obvious relief from employees who had lived through the uncertainty of the security compliance crisis. Many had worried about job security and company stability during the darkest periods of the remediation effort. The contract awards represented validation that their work and commitment had preserved Apex's future. David Chen used the occasion to publicly acknowledge Sarah's leadership in not only resolving the security crisis, but positioning Apex for unprecedented growth opportunities. Her expertise and dedication had transformed a potentially fatal compliance failure into competitive advantage that distinguished Apex from larger, more established contractors. Sarah's response was characteristically modest and forward-looking. She emphasized that the contract awards represented beginning rather than culmination of Apex's security excellence journey. The next phase would require sustained commitment to continuous improvement and organizational growth that would test everyone's capability. The celebration was tempered by recognition of the intensive work that lay ahead. Implementing the security requirements for 3 major classified programs would require hiring additional cleared personnel, completing facility construction projects, and establishing new operational procedures that integrated security considerations into every aspect of project management. Sarah spent the following weeks developing detailed implementation timelines that coordinated security infrastructure development with program performance requirements. The complexity of managing multiple classified programs simultaneously would require sophisticated project management and careful attention to segregating sensitive information according to program-specific requirements. The hiring process for additional security personnel proved challenging, as qualified candidates were in high demand throughout the defense industry. Sarah's reputation within the security community helped attract experienced professionals who were interested in joining an organization with strong leadership and growth opportunity. Facility construction began in April, with specialized contractors implementing security measures that approached intelligence community standards. The construction process required careful coordination with Pentagon security officers who inspected progress regularly to ensure compliance with classified facility requirements. By summer, Apex had emerged as a recognized leader in defense contractor security excellence. Industry publications featured articles about their recovery from compliance crisis and subsequent growth into major program participation. Sarah was invited to speak at conferences about security best practices and organizational resilience. The most satisfying recognition came from Pentagon security officers, who began referring other contractors to Sarah for consultation on complex security challenges. Her expertise was increasingly valued throughout the defense community, establishing Apex as a resource for security excellence rather than simply a contractor pursuing profitable opportunities. Jake Morrison's departure from Apex in May was handled professionally and amicably. His final months with the company had included valuable learning about the specialized requirements of defense contracting and the critical importance of understanding complex regulatory environments before implementing efficiency improvement. Jake's farewell message to the company acknowledged his initial misunderstanding of security compliance requirements and expressed appreciation for the learning opportunities that his time at Apex had provided. His candid reflection on lessons learned was well received by employees who had lived through the consequences of his original decision. Sarah's promotion to Chief Security Officer had evolved into an executive role with broad responsibility for organizational security culture and strategic planning. Her influence extended beyond compliance activities to include participation in business development, strategic planning, and organizational development initiatives. The one-year anniversary of Sarah's termination passed without formal acknowledgement, but the contrast between Apex's position in March compared to the previous year was obvious to everyone. The company had grown from a regional contractor facing potential extinction to a nationally recognized leader in classified program execution. The auditorium at the National Defense Industrial Association's annual conference buzzed with anticipation as Sarah Mitchell approached the podium to deliver the keynote address on security excellence in defense contracting. The invitation to speak represented recognition that her leadership had established new standards for contractor security capabilities and organizational resilience. 18 months had passed since Sarah's return to Apex Defense Solutions, and the transformation was evident in every aspect of the company's operation. What had begun as desperate